Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the second installment to the RepPath leadership series that we're doing with leaders around the country. So I'm very excited to host this. My name is Joe Licata. I'm the founder and president of RepPath, and I'm hosting the podcast series. Today, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. His name is Adam Hodges. Adam is a veteran of the medical sales industry. He's currently the president of AJH Consulting, and I'm so excited to have him on the call today. Today, our topic is going to be beyond the sale. What makes a rep great? And I want to welcome Adam. And Adam, if you could please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background, and you could take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Well, I've never been on a podcast, and this is also a live cast, so there's no editing. So it's like a
No pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a lot of fun. I wish that I had a resource like this when I was just starting out. Andrew Hart is a mentor of mine. He helped me get into the industry. He was with Johnson & Johnson Ethicon for a long time and kind of helped me navigate some of the past to break into the industry. And I live in Nashville, married, 3 kids. I was with Accenture doing consulting and change management for a couple of years, and then started with J&J with Janssen in Florida. They moved me from Birmingham, Alabama, and then moved me to Nashville. And then I started with the med device, my career there with United States Surgical, and was there for about 5-6 years, and then followed my VP of sales, John Hieronymus, to a small startup called Salient Surgical, which was later acquired by Medtronic, and was there for 10 years and had different levels of roles and responsibilities, and then went to a small respiratory startup 6 months before COVID. I knew I was joining a respiratory company, but I didn't know COVID was going to happen. So that was just a wild ride, a lot of fun, and we did a lot of meaningful work. And then I was at a small startup called Surgical Innovation Associates, started out of Northwestern, and that was one of the highlights of my career, and it was acquired by Integra Life Sciences. And then most recently, I was with an imaging company utilizing AI or investing in AI for women with breast cancer. And for the last several months, I've been doing consulting with different private equity and VC companies, as well as previous people that I've worked with. So it's a real privilege to be here. I don't have all the answers. The things that I do have, I think I've learned from getting things wrong and kind of trying to fail forward over time. So I'm not a saint. I feel like I'm a survivor. I've had a lot of great people in my career, so it's a privilege to be here, Joe.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and we're definitely happy to have you here. And just so one more note for everyone listening, if anybody wants to hear a copy of the podcast, this is obviously being recorded live, but you can, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Unfiltered Medical Sales Coaching, you can view that. I'll also get a copy out to Adam and anyone else that wants the link so they can view this later on, just as a quick FYI. But Adam, just to get started, I know we've had a couple conversations, and you told me about the factors that make a great rep. So if you could just dive right in and talk about those 5 factors that you have, I think would be a great place to start.
Yeah, happy to do that. I use this as a form of hiring and screening and selecting and recruiting top talent, as well as coaching, and I'd also like to hit 3 kind of, if I think about the 5 factors, it's sort of the scaffolding. I think the foundation for me is 1, integrity and character. I think that can't be underestimated. We just recently witnessed the NFL draft, and these teams go through rigorous analysis at the combine, and they go to the schools and they look at their talent and their 40 times and their bench press and broad jump and all the quantitative pieces, but they spend a lot of time talking to people and to peers and family about their character. And so, I've been at companies, and maybe you have too, when you go to a national sales meeting or regional meeting, and one or two people get sent home because they made some bad choices. So I think you've got to hire for character as well. I think that's foundational. And there's some questions that I can maybe share later that maybe help you spotlight that. I tell our kids all the time that Warren Buffett, who I don't know if he's the richest man in the world these days with Elon Musk, but he's famous for saying it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And so our decisions matter. And then also competitive character is important in that, because that's what people do when no one's looking, and it's doing what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how it needs to be done. And so a person that stands out to me is Scott Foss. We worked together at SIA, and there was a challenging count here in Nashville, and he kept just plugging away and doing the right things. And he eventually, ended up winning that opportunity. The other thing that's really important is resilience. And I made a LinkedIn post a few days ago about the power of not yet. And resilience can be learned. And I think as sales leaders, it's incumbent upon us, and almost a burden of responsibility, to create those cultures of resilience, meaning that we learn from failure, that we celebrate failure, and we fail fast and we iterate. And so for you, maybe you just started your career, you're looking to get into the industry, adding yet to the end of that statement, such as I haven't achieved my monthly number yet. I haven't closed Dr. Jones yet. I haven't won sales rep of the year yet. Our self-talk really matters, because sometimes we allow a negative critic to live rent-free in our head, and it's not adding anything positive to who we are. I think the other piece to that is coachability. And I think coachability is important whether you're at an established company like a Stryker, J&J, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, or at a small company. And I've been at small companies the last few years of my career. And being coachable is important, because as you're driving, you're trying to build the engine while you're moving. And so it takes a lot of collaboration and back and forth communication. And so that coachability piece is important. And I look for that in an interview. And one of the questions I like to ask is, can you share with me your favorite coach or mentor that you've had over your career, and what did you learn? And that often tells you as the interviewer about their coachability. And it also gives me the opportunity to say, well, I'm glad you shared that with me, because I want to be the best coach that you've ever worked for. So it gives me a high bar to live up to. So those are just kind of the three foundational pieces: that character piece, the resilience, and the coachability. The 5 factors are motivation, influence, work orientation, relationships, and business acumen. And motivation is pretty straightforward. It's that self-starter. They have a drive to achieve. If you've taken the Gallup Strength Finders, achiever is one of the 34 strengths. And for someone with an achiever strength, it's the engine that keeps them going. They have this incessant desire to want to succeed and achieve. The challenge and the flip side of that is being able to manage that and find, kind of like lions. Their life is rest, feed, rest, rest, feed, rest, or hunt. And so I think you've got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, or you can burn out. One rep comes to my mind is John Bastone. We worked together at SIA, and I was challenged because John didn't have industry specific experience, but I'd worked with John at a previous company, and he won Rookie of the Year. And I just knew that John would win, and he's motivated to be the best version of himself. And he was relentless in how he attacked his business, and he's just got a big engine. And whether you're applying for a job or you're in a job, assessing your motivation and what your why is and what inspires you. For John, I mean, he's dedicated to his family and being the best person that he is. You've got to figure out what your why is. And I think the pro tip here is, it's you've got to find ways to reward yourself and motivate yourself. When I was at a company, I wanted to be able to achieve my sales number and 3 days out of the week. And for the fourth day was sort of extra or gravy. And if I did that, then my reward to myself was to play golf Friday afternoons at 2 o'clock. And I always met my goals. And so I was able to do that. So it's one thing to be motivated, but it's another thing to stay motivated. And I think the other piece about the motivation is customers really sense your intentions. And if you're motivated to put the patient first and be customer centric, that means a lot, because that is, they're very skilled at being able to pick up on that. And so other signs of motivation is taking that initiative. They're ready to take on new opportunities. They're also compensation oriented. There's a person I've worked with over my career. I've never heard of this before, but he said that he wanted W-2 therapy. And I've never forgotten when Jeff said that. And so sales reps often join our profession because of the ability to be compensated based on our inputs and our effort and the autonomy in our role. And so it's also important to know how your comp plan works and to work backwards and to know what you want to make and have a plan that gets you there. The other thing that's important is to have a strong learning orientation. I think some of the best reps that I've hired and coached and been around are the ones that continue to learn and are never satisfied. You know, there's a saying that readers are leaders and leaders are readers. And I think you can read so much just on LinkedIn with the content that's now provided. And I was working with a rep and they read Neil Rackman's book, Spin Selling, and they were pre-call planning. And that's something I think is really important. And I asked them, like, what's motivating you to do that? And so they said, well, in the book, it said that the top 1% of all sales reps, based on the Oxford research, are people that do pre-call planning and post-call analysis. And so they pick that up on their own. And so hopefully you're getting great coaching where you are, but it's also incumbent upon you to be your own coach and be the best version of yourself. I think also part of that motivation piece is having a hunter mentality. And you probably hear that a lot, like they're either hunters or farmers. And I've seemed to have gravitated toward roles that are business development and require a hunter mentality. And I like that. And there's nothing wrong with being farmers, but there's hunting involved with that as well. And so being able to spot that, being able to cultivate that and keep that as an asset and a strength is important. The other piece is influence. We probably won't make it in sales if we don't have some level of influence. And so maybe a way to think about that is sales assertiveness. I remember I worked with Michelle Bergman, and she talked about positive confrontation. And so it's challenging the customer. If you're familiar with the challenger sale, it's teaching the customer, and it's tailoring the message, and it's taking control of the sale. And so there's this positive assertiveness that is needed as part of influence. I was an English major, so I love really simple math examples. I can understand those. But I always remember that influence is persuasion divided by resistance. There's always going to be resistance. And there's, it's one thing to sell someone that maybe needs it. It's another thing to sell something to an individual that doesn't yet recognize their problem, and you're there to help identify that problem and to walk them through that process. I had a area vice president at US Surgical, Steve Lampkin, and he was doing a field ride with me in Nashville, and he said, do you know what the 60-20-20 rule is? And I said, I don't. I know the 80-20 rule. And he said the 60-20-20 rule is 20% of the business you're going to wake up and have falling out of bed based upon the loyalty with your product. The other 20% will be loyal to the other company because that's how they trained. It's the 60% that you're after. And so it's our ability to influence that 60% that really determines if we'll be average, good, or great. And then, that persuasiveness, people want to hear from people that are convincing and clear and compelling. I remember I was with Kayla Evans in Richmond, Virginia, and we were speaking with a divisional leader, and she communicated our story and told it in just an amazing way. And this area director said, why don't we use this in all of our hospitals? And on the spot, they made a divisional decision. And I think it's because, Kayla is persuasive and she can influence, and it's the ability to motivate and move people to action. The third thing is work orientation, and it's how we work. It's it kind of measures discipline, reliability, willingness to work hard consistently. You might hear in an interview, what's a typical day look like? And what the interviewer wants to know is, how do you show up, and how do you start, and how do you manage, downtime? If you're a medical device rep and you're at a hospital and you're selling a complex device or technology or service, there's always opportunities to go cold call and work with different stakeholders, because I've seen over the years where deals don't happen or they get hung up in value analysis because we don't have enough stakeholders that understand the need and support the need, especially in today's world where there's much more information asymmetry, meaning they've got more information than we do. If I was going to try to sell you all a car, I know when I got it fixed. I know if I had an accident. I know if the engine was flooded, et cetera, et cetera. I have the advantage. Now the hospitals do, with all their database research, with ECRI and benchmarking, their ability to see pricing within their health system and GPO. And so it's incumbent upon us to have as many stakeholders around the table that understand and appreciate the value of our technology, not just clinically, but economically, and that they can tell that story even better than we can behind closed doors, because they're going to be the best salespeople influencing the leadership in their hospital. I shared this with a sales group at Medtronic several years ago, and I confirmed it this morning with AI. So I don't know if AI is right, but back then it is during a week, 17% of the week is actually spent presenting your product. And you think about 40, 50, 60-hour weeks, depending on your drive time and travel. The latest research is 23 to 39%. Most numbers land on 28%. And so what that really means is you've got to work your plan in such a way where you own your calendar, but your calendar doesn't own you, or other people will schedule your days for you. And so we have to be very strategic and selective in how we invest our time, not spend our time, because our time is one of our most important assets.
I love that piece of data because, excuse me, I get reps all the time that say, "Hey, Joe, I just want to go to a place where I can sell." Well, and that's just a great stat to bring up. 17% of the time you're actually presenting. Nobody. I would even think it's a little higher than that, but that's great, because that's a reality of you don't have much time to get out there, so you do have to work your plan. But I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's great, and feel free to interrupt me anytime. But I think that how a person works is important. If they're responsive to customers, you can ask questions in interviews when they experienced a challenging customer issue, how they respond, what was, you kind of use the STAR model, the situation, the task, the action, the result. And then again, having this customers want to buy from companies and from reps that help them solve their problems. And the more that we talk about their problems and challenges, the more that they're going to want to listen to us and work with them, because we're adding value. It's one thing to be a vendor.
So, I'm sorry, can I cut you off there? Because that's a very, very hot point. Great topic to go off a little bit and pick your brain. You talked about customers want to buy from reps that help them solve their problems.
Mhm.
So we always talk about identifying your customers' key drivers.
Mhm.
So do you have any tips or any examples that you've seen where a lot of times where I see an issue, reps come out in it, especially inexperienced reps, company says, here's a new detail aid, go out there and sell your product. They get the
Mhm.
detail aid thrown in front of doctors' faces, but they're not trying to find out their drivers yet and then sell towards them. So if you can elaborate more on that or give any examples of that, please, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'll give examples from the medical device space because that's been where my experience has been the last 20 years. I think one place to start is to look at the hospital's website and what's their mission and their vision and their values. And sometimes they have KPIs that they're trying to achieve. And if you can't find it there, you can ask individuals in the hospital, whether it's the OR director or the VP of perioperative services, what are y'all trying to solve this year? What's been a challenge last year that you want to improve upon? So they may be trying to reduce readmissions or reduce infections, and that can give, if your technology has the capability to be a solution, then that's a clear opportunity to show how your technology can help them. Also, just asking. I think asking is important. One of the questions that I like to ask a surgeon is, what's an example of a technology that you've recently requested, and what was the approval process like? And if they haven't requested a new technology in a while and they can't remember, you may be working with the wrong surgeon, because you need a surgeon with influence and respect and power, if you will, to get approvals. And then if they said it got approved, then to ask, well, how do you think that got approved? Was there a secret recipe? I think you can also ask other people who are part of the process. We don't want hope to be our strategy, and unfortunately, that's what happens a lot. We make these submissions, and we don't have the deck stacked in our advantage. And I would say it's better to delay your VAC submission and ensure that you have as much intel as possible, to ensure that you're solving the right problem and you're positioning it in the most effective way.
Okay, that's great. That's great. No, I appreciate that, because again, that is something that it's hard, because we talk about it and it's an easy thing to say, when, in a management, telling a rep to go out there and just find key drivers. But like you said, sometimes it's going to take time. You might not get that from the first physician you speak to, but you just got to keep having those conversations and digging, because you don't want to go down a path that's the wrong path and it's not something they're looking for, because then you're never going to move the ball forward. So, but
Exactly.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So, I mean, just to pivot a little bit and get into some of these core questions that I got from people reaching out to me that they wanted to get your opinion on, just starting with, the resume interview process. You get a resume from a recruiter, say he sends you 5 candidates, you're reviewing, what are the 3 things that you look for when you're reviewing a resume for one of your roles?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words, but does the resume look polished, and does it look like does it look good? I mean, does it look like it's organized and, formatting and oh, Joe, my screen went blank. Can you hear
You're
me?
good.
Okay.
You're good on our end.
And I've seen resumes with typos and just the basic stuff. I think the other thing that's important is to show increasing roles and levels of responsibility. But even more beyond that is in the interview is to hear the story behind that. There's I remember Jack Welch wrote this example in a book that he wrote straight from the gut, that he would turn the resume over and start asking questions. He wouldn't even look at the resume. He would also go down Pier 39 and in the Bay and have a walking conversation or play golf with the candidate. And so a resume matters. And I've worked with Risa. I can put in the show notes, Kremitsky, I think is how you pronounce her last name, but she's amazing because now resumes, if you submit a resume, here's a public service announcement. If you submit a resume in a PDF format on a job posting, it will not be read by AI. It needs to be in a Word document. And Risa really helped me format my resume in such a way that allows more of AI to capture it. So
Well,
if
can
you
you say
haven't worked,
it again? If you have it, if it's in Word, it's going to read it. But
yes.
in which platform is this that it's reading it? Because
Well, like if you submit something on LinkedIn or Ladders or Monster, I mean, I just mainly use LinkedIn, but if you submit a PDF, either on the quick application or on the company's website through Workday, they have told me that it does not get read because what happens is they have key traits and characteristics and words that they look for in a resume because they'll get hundreds of applications. And so they go to all these conferences and have the latest data. And so Risa redid my resume to make it more AI compatible.
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I'm learning here too, because when I get resumes sent directly to me with Word, I always push my candidates to put it in PDF because Word, the formatting, depending on your cell phone, because most recruiters, hiring managers, they're getting a resume, they're on their phone, they're not sitting at their desk all day long.
Mm-hmm.
The formatting could look off, but
Mm-hmm.
with PDF, it does not. But again, that's something different than Workday and applying for positions. So that's definitely a good point to know. So thank you for that. So I mean, getting back to that, you can't describe it, but it just you know a resume when it looks good when you
Mm-hmm.
see it. So how much weight do you put on metrics and sales rankings, in someone's previous roles, and how important is that?
Yeah, it matters immensely. I look for rankings, I look for awards because we're in a performance-driven industry, and so and then in the interview, I want to know not only what they accomplished, but how they did it, and the individuals that actually can bring their rankings with them adds a whole nother layer of credibility and trust because I guess anybody can make things up. Hopefully they're not, but I do look for awards. I do top grading interview, so it takes a little longer. What you find out where even questions back in high school and college and why they went to the college they did, why they play a collegiate sport, why they were the president of their sorority or fraternity. It gives you an insight into who they are, kind of their grit, their resiliency, their competitive character. And so, having those types of things on there matters.
So you bring up the point of a brag book. Um,
Mhm.
do you ask when they're sitting in the interview if they have a brag book with them and they can provide documentation, or is it something that if they whip that out, explaining their, whatever metrics that they're showing, whatever award, and showing the proof that just goes an extra mile? Like, because curious because I get different feedback when it comes to brag books.
Mhm. Yeah, if they bring a brag book and they let me know about it, I I I don't spend the interview going through that because that sort of derails the whole focus. Um, but I will review it afterwards and I'll ask, where do you want me to start and what do you want me to know when I read this? And then the the other piece is um, uh, I'll ask them if they don't have a brag book, do you have documentation of your performance and your rankings?
Okay. No, it's good to know. What is there any examples of, during that interview that a candidate has really stood out, that really you remember? If you remember anyone specifically, you don't have to give their names, but any instances that they did something that was outside of the box that really blew you away during the interview. That wasn't just, oh, they were a 22-time President's Club winner or anything like that, but just something in the interview that was like, that was different.
Mhm. Well, I can tell you one that happened that didn't go well. The individual started off and said, "I'm going to tell you all of my weaknesses first, because I'm sure you're going to ask me that question." And I was like, "Wow, that's different." So I definitely don't recommend doing that. I don't think there's any sort of magic pill. I think it's being yourself, being authentic, being genuine, being confident. Part of having executive presence is being confident and carrying yourself with a confident posture, and trusting that your preparation is going to come through. And it's a lot of it's a feel. Like, you'll hear people look for the it factor. um, we were coached by Gallup organization for 10 years, and one of the lead consultants would always say, "Yeah, that person has a big hat but no cattle," meaning they've got a lot of swag and a lot of charisma, but they don't have the ability to understand their business or where to go. They can spend their time influencing the wrong people. And so, um, a lot of there's science, but there's a lot of art to it. And you just I don't know, I guess just over time you just spot talent. And what's really important, and what's the hardest thing to do in my opinion, is to hire for fit. Because these three things, motivation, influence, relationship, work style, um, and business acumen, it's all specific to the company and to the role. And that a scorecard needs to be created. And so you can ask the hiring manager, "What's your scorecard, and how are you going to know if you're hiring the right individual, and what are you looking for?" Most people, when they ask that question, when I get asked that question, they don't actually follow up. They just ask the question, and then they don't demonstrate how they actually meet or exceed those expectations. And it's like asking a surgeon, "What's your most important problem that you want to solve?" And they say infection, and you don't respond with how your technology or product solves that problem.
Sure. Perfect. Well, what I'm going to do right now, guys, we're going to just pause for about 30 seconds. James, if there's any questions from the crowd, if not, then we'll keep going. But if we have any questions that we can address now, I'll let Adam answer that.
Couple of statements, not so much questions.
Okay.
Andrew Hart, spin selling has stats on that. Reps who ask the most problem questions are the most respected by prospects / customers. I have from Brent Daughtry, confidence and authenticity is key. Great suggestions. And then this one I can't bring up. It's in LinkedIn. It's from Stacy Holiday. Good to know about the PDFs versus Word. I wonder how long that will last. I would think software will be developed. That's all we have in the chats right now. No questions, just statements. So if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the comment section, and I'll make sure that we get to them at the end of the show.
Yeah. And I apologize for that, guys. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the show, and I forgot to bring that up, to just bring your questions up, and we'll address them, at a couple area spots in the show. But just to get back into it, Adam, more industry specific questions and real talk. Again, couple of points that I always have to ask because it gets brought up every day. Do you care about two things that reps always want to bring into it to an interview? We talked about this: 30, 60, 90s and cover letters.
Mm-hmm.
Do they mean anything?
I think they do. I think generally a cover letter is sent prior to meeting with the hiring manager, so that can be used as part of the process to get to the manager. The cover letter is if people are applying for a role and ask for a cover letter, you need to submit a cover letter. I've also talked to several people in the industry. If it asks for a resume, you can actually include your cover letter as the first page of your resume. So they read that and then they see your resume. So that's a kind of a clever hack to get it included. And you can use AI to create ideas and for ideation, but it needs to be authentic and it needs to be honest, and it needs to stand out, because anything that AI is going to generate isn't going to stand out. It's going to sound like a lot of other people. And then the 30, 60, 90, I personally appreciate that, but what I don't respect is a 30, 60, 90 that's just sort of put together to kind of rubber stamp it. To effectively build a 30, 60, 90 day plan, you need to have a lot of conversations, and you need to understand the job, and that conversation needs to take place with the hiring manager and the people that you do field rides with and other people that you connect with in the organization. Someone that is intentional about a 30, 60, 90 can stand out if it's done the right way.
Okay. And, when you say done the right way, what are some tips that you can give? What's something or an example there, like, okay, that was a well done 30, 60, 90. I mean, not to get into all the specifics of someone's, but some of the key points that they may be able to do or bring up when creating that.
Well, I would first say Michael Watkins. He was a Harvard professor. Now he's over at IMD in Switzerland. Our company had him come and present to us in Boston while he was still at Harvard. And he's known as a transition leadership expert. And he's written the first 90 days. The next 90 days is a second book. And then your next move is his latest work. And there are so many great ideas in there. The type of conversations you need to have with your company, with your boss, how they prefer to communicate, the importance of creating early wins, building strategic alliances cross-functionally within the organization. And so, very simply, the first 30 days is you need to listen and you need to learn. And the next 30, you need to begin developing your ideas. And then the next 90, the next 30 is implementing. And it's not like so concrete, all those sort of crossover, but that's just the high picture of what that 90-day plan looks like. For example, if I'm a rep going into a territory that I know a large company has the majority of the lion's share of the market share, then I need to figure out who's using and who's not. If the company doesn't have definitive or acuity data and have the metrics around that, and then begin developing a go-to-market strategy on how I can disrupt that market through med ed and different trainings. And so that's that developing piece. And then you need to get it scheduled. So that's just kind of a high view of what that can look like.
Okay. And when it comes to questions during an interview, reps are always concerned, like, Joe, I want to make sure I'm asking the right questions. What are good questions besides, tell me how many vacation days we have, and, the ridiculous things that sometimes reps do ask, but what are really insightful questions that when they ask that, that's something that you're showing, you're standing out a little bit or showing a little more thought to the role?
Yeah, I don't think questions should be reserved for the last 5 or 10 minutes of the interview. I think you could begin asking questions in the first 5 minutes of the interview. For example, you may notice that they went to a certain university. Maybe you attended that university, or that manager recently got promoted. You can ask them what brought them to the company and how they're enjoying their new role. Like, what surprised you in that role, and what have you learned in the first 60 days? That's about creating connection. That's about influence, because people who are interested in others are interesting people. And so I think you can start asking questions at the beginning. You can also ask for clarification questions throughout the process, or what about this? And then I would also say, if the manager is not asking the right questions, meaning about your experience, you can ask that type of question. For example, I think this would be an important question for you to know, or to ask me about, why I won this award, or whatever that might be. If the questions aren't getting asked, you can help facilitate that. And then at the end, you want to understand what brought them to the organization, and what are the tailwinds and the headwinds, and what are they trying to solve for, and where would they jump in if they were in the role. And then it's important to listen, because a lot of times, in my experience in interviewing candidates, they almost give themselves a star for asking the question, but it's asking the question and then being able to respond with how you can actually add value to that organization. That's one of the ways you stand out.
Awesome. And is there anything pre-call, when I say pre-call, pre-interview, that you expect reps to be doing before they get in the interview with you, besides the simple stuff of reviewing the company, going on your LinkedIn, checking out your background? What's the next step that these reps can be doing? Again, so they're taking their research then to another level.
Mm-hmm. Well, preparation is key, and it really shows up if they have spoken to other reps or other people in the company. That shows initiative. It shows that they're a self-starter, shows motivation. And if they had to continue to try and follow up with someone on the team that was really, really busy, that's happened with me, and I've seen that with other people. And you, as a manager, know that this one particular person is maybe not so free with information, and they're able to glean or extract some information. That's a sign of influence, and it shows strong work orientation. I think you also want to know about the product, and the company, and the history, and the values, because you're interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you. And so you want to understand what their culture is like, because culture is not just words stenciled on a wall. That looks really beautiful, and I've worked for places like that. But what makes those words stand on a wall are actions, because what we do should speak so loudly that other people can't hear what we're saying. And every person we bring into the company impacts our culture. Every person. It either adds or detracts. So just preparation. There's tons of tools out there. And I mean, I one time I was in an interview for 4.5 hours, and literally 4.5 hours. And
Jeez.
I somehow had enough questions and preparation to make it through that. I went home and took a nap afterwards, but it was pretty long, but lot of ground covered.
Wow. And is there, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought right now. But in terms of follow-up, because again, very important. We know send the thank you email, but sometimes candidates get nervous with the frequency. When's too much? But when should you be sending the thank you, and then the follow-up, especially if you left off with the rep that the next step of the process, we're going to be bringing three reps back for the second phase, with the vice president of the division.
Mm-hmm.
What looks good to you in terms of follow-up?
Well, I think follow-up, begins before the interview. And what I mean by that is sending the manager an email a day or two in advance, stating that you're excited to meet with them, and state some things you're excited about, why you're interested in this company. Maybe there's a recent news posting on their website you want to highlight, and say, these are the 3 things I hope to accomplish in our meeting together. That I've got the willingness, that I've got the ability, and I've got the track record, whatever the 3 things might be. And then when you follow up with them, you want to take notes, because they're going to be giving you the bullseye, essentially, of if you've actually done your job and you've asked the right questions, they're going to tell you what they're looking for. And so you want to respond within probably 2 or 3 hours, depending on how your schedule is, like the sooner the better. I would definitely not sit on it overnight. And you want to list those 3 or 4 things or whatever they might be, and then list 2 or 3 bullet points on how and why you will meet and exceed those things. That's a good evidence of listening. Listen, interviews are sales calls. You're selling yourself and they're the buyer. And so every encounter is an indicator of how you're going to represent the company in a selling situation.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you brought that up about the pre email sent before the interview, because I always push a lot of my clients to do that when they're going for a job, because everyone sends the thank you, or at least most should. Some still don't, but very rarely does someone send that email before the call showing their excitement.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you bringing that up. Again, I'm going to take a pause again to see, James, if we have any questions from the crowd.
We have a bunch of questions that came in after we made that announcement.
Sorry, guys.
In terms, Michael Puglisi, I think I pronounced that terribly. In terms of developing as a rep, how would you recommend that an ASR go from farming in an account management to hunting and moving up to territory manager?
Yeah, Michael, that's a really insightful question. There's a person in Nashville that I've had several conversations with, and I think it starts with asking for what you want and being really clear about that, and asking for a plan on how you can move to a full line representative. And if they don't have it, well, and before you go meet with them, come up with 3 or 4 ideas on what that looks like. Because they may not have, they never maybe been asked that question before. So what you may do is, like, I'd like to carve out the ability for me to 1 day a week, or whatever the metric might be, to sell this new product. Like, you have to advocate for you. Personal development is 80 to 85% on the employee. A lot of people think that they show up and the company's just going to develop them. It is 85, maybe 90% incumbent upon the employee to want it. And then when the organization hears that, they've got to come through and meet and exceed that. And let's just say maybe a full line rep isn't the next step, maybe it's something else, but they've got to work with you to get there. And so you've got to take control of your career, and it sounds like you want to, because no one else is going to accept you.
Adam, real quick, we lost your video. We hear you on the audio, but you froze on your end.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, you froze.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's see.
There you go. We got you back.
Okay.
You're good.
Comcast is not great in Nashville.
Happens to the best of us. Okay, we have Stacy Holiday. How do we view gaps in employment? How do you view gaps in employment?
Yeah, thanks, Stacy, for a question. I think it depends. I think it is it's seeking to understand before you come to conclusions. And so if I have a gap in my employment, it's incumbent upon me to be able to tell the story, a clear story, and make that, so clear and compelling, and seeking to remove doubt. And when I say that, I need to then follow up, with the interviewer. Do you have any questions about that? Do you have concerns about that? This is a sales call. And so there are people, maybe they were on bereavement, maybe they lost a family member, whatever it might be, but it's about the story. And yeah. And so one of the best reps I ever hired came to me, and they were, I think, like 5 or 6 months pregnant, and people at my company thought I was crazy. But what I saw in this person was unbelievable, unmatched talent. She had served in the military. She had focus like I have rarely seen, and she could influence anyone in the hospital. And so I was willing to take a risk on her, because you never know what can happen We have 3 kids, and fortunately they're all healthy, but things happen. And so, it's every interview is a sales call.
Okay, so the next question we have, it is Brent Doherty. Also, I appreciate when they try to fully understand the job they are interviewing for, not just wanting a job. Then we have Keith Layden. Working with startups, they don't always provide rankings or award trips like more established companies. What do you suggest to them to quantify their performance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Keith, and thanks, Brent, for that comment. There are a lot of different ways you can measure that. One, I would start with if you have a sales op person, what are the KPIs that your organization is looking to measure, and how do you stack against that? What's your year-over-year performance, quarter-over-quarter performance? If you launched a new product, you can quantify the revenue and the percent growth. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Again, it's also a story. One of the things that great marketers do is they tell great stories, and it's incumbent upon us to be able to tell the story about our life and about the value that we bring. Because, I think the other thing that I see a lot is our oldest son just shared this quote with me. It's from Oscar Wilde. Be you because everyone else is already taken. Like, don't try to be like anyone else. Early in my career, I was a really good chameleon and I could do that. But what happens is you lose the power of being you, and being you is what sets you apart. And that's what a lot of companies or customers will buy you before they buy a product. And so it's being really clear on the value that you bring. And if you aren't clear, I would ask for help, because if you've done well, there's a story to tell.
And can I add just one thing to Keith's question? That's a great point, and that obviously great answer from Adam. But Keith brings up a great point for a lot of you guys that are working with startups. If you didn't start doing it already, start today. Keep track of all your results. Put it into Excel spreadsheet. Number one, you want to make sure when you're working with a lot of startups, there's great companies out there, but they're starting, they're running around with the chicken with their head cut off. I mean, they might not have all the processes in place. You want to make sure that you're tracking that not only, for future positions, but also for your own metrics, and to make sure you're getting paid out correctly, because 6 months to a year can go by and they might not have it tracked, but you can show the performance and how much you improved over the past year, which they might not really see. So take it upon yourself to start tracking that today, because you're definitely going to need it moving forward. And if you tell a future employer, well, they didn't do that, they might not think that you're in a real sales position. Mm-hmm. So just take it upon yourself now. That was it.
Okay, we have Ben Neff. At what stage of the interview process is it appropriate for an interviewee to independently start reaching out to prospective surgeons? Does this show initiative, or can it be a red flag?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for your question. This is a really important question, and if you haven't considered this, I would add this tool to your toolbox. I think what shows strong emotional intelligence is to ask. There's sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, but you're a guest in their house. You haven't gotten the job yet. And so I think it's important to ask the hiring manager, and sometimes they will direct you to go speak with surgeons. That is part of the interview process. It's gotten a little harder sometimes with access and all the different, 77 different vendor requirements in companies. But I would ask for permission, and I would also ask, what would you like for me to know or learn from this? Because if you're just going to be talking with some random surgeon, that may not be as potentially risky. But if you're going to one of their KOLs, and you don't want to upset them, right? So I think it's important to ask for guidance, and that shows really good listening. And then you can overachieve and over deliver on that. But that's a really good point, Ben.
We have, let me see her name, Stacy Samek. This is great information. Thanks, Joe, for doing these podcasts with such influential speakers.
It's our pleasure. Thank you to Adam.
Then we have Megan Banner. Do you have any suggestions as to how to tackle the "tell me about yourself" question?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. That is such a, that can be such a dicey question, because what the interviewer is often wanting to know is, well, first of all, if you answer that the wrong way, you can talk yourself out of a job because you say too much. And so you need to have that, you need to have 3 bullet points, and you need to have that answer within like 30, no more than a 60-second elevator pitch. And it needs to be able to show who you are as a person, kind of the things that we talked about: the grit, the resiliency, the competitive fire, your results, who you are, kind of your brand that you want to be known for. You need to be able to do that in 30 or 60 seconds, and then pause and see what they say. And would you like any other information, or would you like to go specifically into my resume? Another way to answer that is, where would you like for me to begin? Because you don't want to make assumptions. I had a friend say something to me recently. When we make assumptions, we do something called a suicide. Like we make assumptions and it does not go well. So often a better answer is a better question.
That's a great point, because you don't know how far some managers might want you to just stay professionally, and then some might want you to get into your personal side a little bit too, to learn more about who you are. So that is a great point to get the clarification.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that, and interviewers don't like this, but if you go back to what a great, a challenger rep does, they teach for distinction, they tailor so it resonates, and they take control of the call. What you can say is, before I tell you about myself, I'd like to understand more about what you're looking for in this role and why this position is open. And then you have given yourself a little bit of time. That's what attorneys do often, is they say objection. There's a lot of posturing in the courtroom to create time to think. And then you can respond and you can hit the bullseye.
We have Kevin McGard. What are some keys to highlight if you are looking to transition from one industry into another, maybe to offset lack of experience in the new industry?
Well, I'd want to understand how your background compared to the other industry. If it's in med, because even going from one med device sector to another can be like opposite ends of the world. So I think you got to understand what your job and your experience is all about, what it offered you, what you did, the story there, and then you need to take a look at what that industry is. I had a hard time going from pharmaceutical sales to med device, and I got 3 or 4 companies, kind of the ninth inning, and I was very fortunate. Mark Kachamba took a chance on me, and I think I just believed so much in myself, and I came prepared. I think he went to the Citadel and he's impressed that my shoes were shined, although he uses like real polish and I use the fake stuff from Walmart. And and if that's really what you want to do, there's people out there that can help you with that story. But you've got to feel the conviction, and if you want to get there, there'll be a path for you to find it.
We got Stacy. She said thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have Megan Banner. Can you please tell us the most impressionable close for the job on an interview?
I think the best close in any environment is the one you don't have to ask for. And what I mean by that is you have demonstrated such value and such intrigue that the hiring manager says, here are the next steps, because you should always find out what's the process. That is impressionable, because it means you've done your job. Now, if that doesn't take place, again, finding out what the bullseye is, and then closing them on that, and then asking for a next meeting, I think would be impressionable. And I don't know how consistent. I don't always experience that when I'm hiring people, and I think that would leave a strong impression.
We have Michael Puglisi. What are the benefits and challenges in switching verticals from something such as an ortho to CRM? What advice do you have in pivoting?
CRM, is that like a QADMD, like a
It's cardiac rhythm management.
cardiac? Okay.
Cardiac.
Yeah. Sorry, it used to be CRDM, but I'm a dinosaur. So I think networking. I think it's over 70% of jobs are going to be found through a network. So you got to network. You got to build connections, and a lot of the things that make a successful orthopedic rep are the same traits that make a CRM rep. Covering cases at all times of the day, being a technical expert, having great ability to connect with surgeons and doctors. So there is complete transferability, but you've got to do the hard work of networking and understanding your story, and keep working at it every day.
Yeah, and a good point, great points, Adam. But one thing I would add in regards to networking, because I've worked on both in both sectors, the one common denominator that is always in the room for these cases is the anesthesiologist. So when there's downtime in the cases, before or after the case, don't just look at that anesthesiologist like he's just some other, or she's some other person in the room, and build relationships with them, because they know all the surgeons. So the more that you can build relationships with anesthesia, they are the gateway into getting from one specialty to another. So don't overlook them when you're in the case. Make sure you're having conversations.
We have a couple thank yous. Keith Layden, thank you. Both my actions are confirmed. Megan Banner, thank you for great feedback. And she also followed up. Is this being recorded? I lost my connection a few times. Would love to listen again. Megan, I'll post the YouTube link in the chat for you so you can go back and rewatch it whenever you'd like. Joe, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I mean, yeah, please, for anybody that is listening, again, I apologize for not saying to post your questions, throughout the call. So I am sorry about that, but you can get all this, on my YouTube channel, Unfiltered Medical Sales Coaching. We're going to be doing these, hopefully every Wednesday at 3 p.m. With sales leaders around the country to try to get a different take about, everyone's views, not only on breaking in, but we're going to also get into more complex, more advanced conversations, in the weeks to come. But yeah, you'll have full access to all that. Subscribe to the channel. Obviously it's free, but then you'll have continued access to all the content that we're posting on there.
And that's all the questions that we have for today.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you, James. Thank you for navigating that, quarterbacking that. I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone for joining today. I appreciate, all your questions, and most importantly, Adam, this was unbelievable. I mean, I know I learned a lot, and I'm an old man too. So to get 1 or 2 points I was hoping to get, but I got more than that from you today. You really taught me a lot, and I really do appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully we have you back soon. So if you do want to share any of your info, to any of the people out there, if they want to reach out to you, again, now's the time if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, happy to help. And Joe, thank you for inviting me on your show. I love the work that you're doing. I think it's needed, and I wish I had this when I was starting my career. And there's a lot of value even today. So hearty thanks to you. And yeah, I can send a document. I can find out how to best do that maybe through your website. But I came up with 10 things that I wish that I knew at 30, like my 30-year-old self, that would have saved me from stepping in the ditch and making more money and all those things. So I can share that with your audience.
Yeah. And that's great. Hey, guys, if anybody, wants a copy of the document, feel free to reach out to me. You either can send me an email, joe@reppath.com, or also you can message me, on LinkedIn, and then we can get that document out to you, and we'll take it from there. But again, thank you, Adam. This was great. Thanks again for everyone for joining, and hopefully you can tune in next week at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you, guys.
everyone.